Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video and talk about this little topic that I personally thought would be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video overall that I'm going to review by the boxing channel known as Dante's Boxing Nation. And overall, I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a longer introduction. I'm not really sure how long it's going to be, but I thought overall that I would somewhat compare it to an old saying that, of course, many of you, including myself, overall probably have heard over the years. Overall, for a certain slogan, overall, when I was younger, I really never thought that this slogan really made any sense, or overall, this saying, but there was always certain people that would say that in order to move on from certain things, you would have to use forgiveness against those people that wronged you, that basically forgiveness was not for those other people, it was not for the closure of the people that wronged you in your life, but that it was for yourself. And it took me a very, very long time to actually realize what that truly meant. But I think all in all, now with certain experiences and now overall with a little bit more age under my belt, I finally overall can truly somewhat understand what that means. Now some of you may say, what the hell are you talking about, and what the hell does that have to relate to this video? Well, a lot of the times overall, when it comes to my videos, especially reviewing that of Dante's Boxing Nation, Dante, you can very clearly tell a lot of the times with certain fighters like that of a Canelo Alvarez or a Tyson Fury or a Vasily Lomachenko or an Alexander Usyk, you can very well tell that a lot of energy that Dante's Boxing Nation is really trying to put out there. Same with Boxing Ego and same with Aki TV and some of these other LDBC and new media channels. A lot of the energy that they really try to put out overall is basically trying to fight a war that, in my opinion, really is not winnable by trying overall to stoop down to their level, or at least overall, it makes you look worse in return. Now, some people overall would say, well, ESPN, in my view, also has a lot of biased narratives, and I would tend to agree. But Dante's Boxing Nation, once again, and this is why I always call him someone that is very highly emotional and very clearly has a racial bias. He's not a logical and objective thinker. He never has been. He never will be. It just is what it is. Some people are not meant to be that way. Because Dante's Boxing Nation, when he takes a look at Canelo Alvarez and ESPN and Tyson Fury, the only reason why I could possibly see why he expends so much energy reporting overall on certain stories of these fighters and basically trying to degrade their career is because he hates these fighters. And if you're an objective and logical person overall, and if you're a person that is supposed to be moving on overall for those of you that wronged you in the past, and don't get me wrong, that's not me saying that everything needs to be forgiven, because there are certain things in my opinion that are unforgivable, or certain people overall who may be sleazy or snakes at the end of the day to where they cannot be trusted, or they're just bad characters. But at the end of the day, when you hate something, especially to that degree, you're wasting a lot of time overall instead of possibly being objective and logical. And that's what Dante's Boxing Nation does with a lot of his breakdowns. In my opinion, once again, there's certain things in my view where his heart and his mind are somewhat in the right place. But once again, when you hate something, you're thinking about it quite a bit and you're expending way too much energy on it. When you hate a person, or when you hate someone that wronged you in the past, or when you hate something, say if you're a fan overall of a certain sports athlete, which is what Dante's Boxing Nation is, and this is why it's also not that great to be a fan of a particular athlete, because a lot of the times overall it also will ruin your logic and objectivity, because you will be basically in love with that athlete so much that when it comes to any other threat possibly of that other athlete, you're basically going to hate them, or you're going to demise them. And then without even realizing it, a lot of people actually put just as much energy overall into hating the other athlete as much as what they do loving their favorite athlete, which is exactly what Dante's Boxing Nation has done with Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. It just is what it is. He actually pretty much hates Tyson Fury just as much as what he loves Deontay Wilder, but without even realizing it, he has overall put just as much energy into both of them without pretty much realizing it. That's why people also say that if you truly hate somebody, you're pretty much just a fan. And the reason why that is because you put just as much energy into something. And like I said, that's why you're not supposed to really hate something. Because hating something shows that overall it shows way too much value to you. And you're really not supposed to really hate anything overall, at least that deeply, unless someone, in my opinion, has wronged you so, so badly. And even then, it is best overall to try and move on and cope with it as best as possible. Because overall, once again, that is going to ruin your logic and objectivity. And when you hate something, once again, you're expending way too much energy overall on hating that object when you could be using that energy elsewhere. So what Dante's Boxing Nation has always proved to me is that with the tearing down of Canelo and some of these other fighters who still very clearly have decent resumes, all he's shown me is that he takes into what some of these guys from ESPN or some of these racial, double standard dudes that may come to his comment section, that he takes what they have to say way, way, way too seriously. Because you don't hate something unless you truly believe that what they have to say is somewhat valuable, at least to you, unless you believe that they have somewhat of power over you. And that's what Dante's Boxing Nation's problem is. A lot of these guys, all in all, they get to him way, way, way too much because, once again, you really don't hate something unless you think overall that thing has a certain amount of power over you. Because when that thing overall doesn't have any power over you, you really don't give a shit overall what they have to say, especially if you believe that it's biased and it has really no value. But Dante's Boxing Nation spends so much time trying to tear down Fury and Canelo Alvarez and some of these other athletes overall because a lot of what these guys have to say, and especially the rankings overall, what these guys could be potentially in the future, it does have a great amount of value to him. And he knows all in all that he has to try to tear them down a little bit later on so they won't be remembered as great fighters. And once again, I don't have a problem with Dante pointing out some of the double standards from ESPN, which in my opinion, very clearly can be shown at times. But once again, Dante does a lot of the same shit. All right, it just is what it is. And there's a reason why Dante's Boxing Nation tries to tear these guys down to such a great degree, because he wants you to believe that Tyson Fury and Canelo Alvarez and these fighters, that they're charlatans. He wants to make you believe that these guys are just great big white hopes, or that these guys are only, promoted by old media allegedly, and that they have no substance within them. But we all know, for those of us that actually know stuff about boxing, that that's not the case. And if you're going to do that, then what really makes you that much better than someone like an ESPN or a Showtime or a Golden Boy? What really makes you much better than them? All you are basically is the same thing. You're just for a different demographic. So it is what it is. But anyways, I just thought that I would kind of do that little introduction. But let's now get into the video of Dante's Boxing Nation. Let's see what he has to say. Let's get into it.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? Now, before we get into this story, for any of you guys that's interested in working with new media and you want to cover the fights live, if you're in California, Miami, DC, Baltimore area, New York, Texas, and even in the UK, if you're real serious about covering fights, contact me at DontesBoxingNation@gmail.com. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this video. So this past weekend, just in case you didn't know, Tyson Fury, he was involved in a fight that no one really paid attention to or watched or promoted, because instead of him fighting Usyk for Undisputed or Joe Joyce, someone like that, he decided to fight Derek Chisora. So after Tyson Fury beats Derek Chisora, ESPN's Mike Coppinger, he puts this photo up on Instagram. And of course, Mike Coppinger, he understands a picture says 1,000 words. That's why he put this picture up. That's why, even though his caption was congratulating Tyson Fury for his performance over Derek Chisora this past weekend, he included pictures of other fighters, other black fighters, coincidentally, like Dillian White.
Listen, what I'll say is this, and some people may ask me, well, do you believe that this was truly racially motivated, or do you believe that this is just somewhat of a coincidence? Because, overall, maybe one could make the point that Tyson Fury, that the reason why he posted this was because he recently stopped all three of these fighters. One overall could make that case, but do I think also that there was a clear racial undertone? Yes, more than likely. It is what it is. ESPN, of course, has had certain double standards against black fighters. And if I had to also guess, this probably was a little bit of a way to troll the Deontay Wilder fan base.
And Deontay Wilder, which would be equivalent to me doing a post-fight video of, let's say, Errol Spence, right? Let's say he just beat Danny Garcia. And then in the thumbnail, I put a whole bunch of opponents that he beat that were all non-black. What would Errol Spence's other opponents have to do with the guy that he just beat this past weekend, for example?
Well, that situation is a little bit different because Errol Spence Jr., first of all, the majority of the opponents that he has beaten overall, they pretty much overall have been of the Latino or the black demographic. So, they may not be able to get away with that, or the message would be that much clearer. Once again, I guess overall, to have a fair point, one could argue that Tyson Fury has stopped all three of these fighters within his past three fights. One could certainly debate that if they wanted to. So maybe it's not as racially motivated as, what we're thinking. Do I believe that there maybe was a little bit of a racial undertone? Yes, more than likely. But, now that I think about it, his last fight, of course, was against Derek Chisora. The fight before that was against Dillian White, and the fight before that was against Deontay Wilder. So who knows? I mean, once again, has ESPN shown me overall that they have certain racial double standards as well? Yes, they do. But, like I said, who knows?
Doing something like that would only make sense if that fighter was retiring and it was some type of tribute type of video. And I'm implying that these are the best guys that Errol Spence or whoever beat in their career. So if you were to look at this picture, and let's say you don't even really watch boxing, right? You're a casual fan. You don't really know who these fighters are. You're automatically going to think, oh, okay, so the white guy has a crown, and there's a picture of three black guys all beat up, right? You're automatically going to think, wow, this Tyson Fury guy is really good. These guys that he beat.
Well, Tyson Fury is really good, but watch what DontesBoxingNation does here all of a sudden. Remember, this is the same guy that once upon a time had Deontay Wilder #4 on his top 10 pound per pound list. But once again, this just goes to show you, and I've been saying this for a very long time, Dante is no different from your ordinary boxing fan. Now, some people may say, well, what's wrong with that? Because all a fanboy is, when it comes down to it, is just someone that goes off of their emotional whims. That's all DontesBoxingNation is. And he will do the exact same things as any other fan in boxing does. Because he basically looks at it and says, well, if you do it, then I should be able to do it.
They must have really been some monsters, right? Mike Coppinger is one of the grand wizards of old media. And this picture that he put up was supposed to illustrate the white superiority of Tyson Fury. For those of you guys who...
Well, listen, once again, these are Tyson Fury's most three recent stopped opponents, so one certainly could argue that. And I am actually overall just somewhat coming to that realization now. But listen, what I also will say is this. Do I think that there is a little bit of the, Tyson Fury, the Black Slayer / overall the elite Caucasian heavyweight overall? It's his time. Do I think that there's a little bit of an undertone there? Yeah, probably overall. But once again, overall, actually, now that I just think of it now, these are Tyson Fury's most three recent stopped opponents.
Don't know too much about Mike Coppinger. I'll tell you this. This is just one small example of who he is. So around the time that Terrence Crawford had stopped Sean Porter, the entire ESPN panel, it was 5 of them at the time. It was Max Kellerman, Mark Kriegel, Joe Tessitore, Andre Ward, Tim Bradley, and Bernardo Usana. So actually it was 6 members on the panel. And all of them on the panel, except for the Mexican analyst, Bernardo Usana, said that Terrence Crawford is pound for pound the best boxer in the world. Bernardo Usana, he said...
Well, once again, and I've already stated this a multitude of times, here's my problem with Terrence Bud Crawford. And it's not that Terrence Bud Crawford is not a, decently great fighter. He is. It's not that he's not extraordinarily talented. But once again, Terrence Crawford is almost like the Drew Brees of boxing. There's a lot of people overall that would claim that Drew Brees, at least through certain seasons, was the best quarterback of the season, but he was never able to win that MVP award to prove that he ever truly was number one throughout the season. So it just is what it is. The only season that you can really debate him as the number one quarterback was the year that, of course, he had that phenomenal Super Bowl performance in that postseason run, I believe in the 2009-2010 season. My point being is this. They complain a lot of the times about Terrence Crawford losing out the number one pound per pound position. And on the surface, especially if you feed into, this bullshit of what a lot of the times Dante will feed you, it seems logical what he's saying. But when you take a look at Lomachenko, and if you were around during when he was accomplishing all that stuff, Lomachenko deserved to be over Terrence Bud Crawford. And if we're really going to be real, that win that Lomachenko has over Guillermo Rigondeaux is still bigger, decently bigger, than any of the wins in Terrence Bud Crawford's career. And some people overall may disagree, but At the end of the day, Sean Porter was never ranked as a top 10 pound for pound fighter. When Lomachenko beat Guillermo Rigondeaux, I believe that he was ranked number 7 on pretty much every top 10 pound for pound list out there. When you talk about Canelo Alvarez, he was able to beat, at the time, when he beat Gennady Triple G Golovkin, he was able to beat the number 3 man overall in Gennady Golovkin. And that win in Canelo Alvarez's career over Gennady Golovkin is decently bigger than any of the wins in Terence Bud Crawford's career. And people can bitch, moan, and complain all they want to about how Gennady Golovkin was 36 years old. He still was ranked within the top 10 pound for pound. And Dante, once again, when it fit his narrative, he overall actually was against Gennady Golovkin, and he overall tried to state about how Gennady Golovkin lost that fight and he should have won it. But now that Canelo's on top once again, now that he's the main threat, in a lot of discussions, now all of a sudden Canelo beat him when he was old. So you can't trust Dante as far as you can see him once again, because he's nothing more than your ordinary fan. And an ordinary fan cannot be trusted to be a logical and objective commentator.
It was still Canelo. So even though pretty much everyone on the panel agreed that Terence Crawford was pound for pound number 1, the best fighter in the world, and even ESPN's website, put Crawford back at the number 1 spot because they had him there before, but
Well, here's my problem with Terence Bud Crawford once again. He was never the unanimous number 1 pound for pound fighter. There's just nothing overall to confirm that, because you have other fighters on the know that pretty much has done what he's done. Sure, he's undefeated, but really against who? Once again, when Canelo lost to Dimitri Bivol, there are several A-grade wins that I can point out in his career right now where I can say, wow, that was very impressive. When Lomachenko lost to Teofimo Lopez, I can take a look at the Jorge Linares win, the Nicholas Walters win, the Gary Russell Jr. win, the Guillermo Rigondeaux win. I can take a look at all those wins and say, wow, that was pretty phenomenal. If, when you talk about Tyson Fury, when he ended up overall, let's say that he ended up losing his next fight to Usyk, we could take a look against Vladimir Klitschko and Deontay Wilder, or even Dillian White, and say, wow, all 3 of those guys were A-grade fighters when Tyson Fury beat them. That's pretty impressive. When you take a look at Terence Bud Crawford's career, is no offense against him, but the only definitive A-grade fighter that he's really ever beaten has been Sean Porter. That's really about it. Now, some people, of course, would debate Gamboa. I think that's a high debate. If you wanted to, I don't have a problem with it. And then, of course, Victor Postal. I'm not really sure if I would go as far to call Postal overall an A-grade fighter, but it's really up to you. That's the problem with Terence Bud Crawford. That's the problem with him. Now, if you were to have him as number 1 right now, I don't really have a problem with it. I just can't have him as unanimous because, in my opinion, he's in the same conversation with Spence, with Fury, and with Usyk. Because all those fighters, when it comes down to when you compare the resume, accomplishments, skill sets, and domination, and whatever other categories you want to rank by, in terms of points, in my opinion, on a point-based scale, they'd all be very similar.
And they were always trying to temporarily find someone to replace Crawford. But the problem is every time they tried to replace Crawford, that fighter would always end up losing. So they would have to put Crawford back at number 1 because he outlasted all of these fighters. From Chocolatito Gonzalez to Lomachenko to Canelo Alvarez. So while ESPN and the majority of...
Well, it's no offense, and Dante overall tries to make the point a lot that Terence Bud Crawford outlasted these guys. But, I mean, once again, I need to see Terence Bud Crawford in a true, top 5 pound for pound fight. Because if he ends up losing to Errol Spence Jr. overall, I mean, what big wins overall in his career can we really say, wow, you know what, he still should stay within the top 5 pound for pound? There's just not a lot of wins in his career to where we can still claim that. If Terence Bud Crawford loses to Errol Spence Jr., he'll still probably remain in my top 10, but he won't be in my top 5. And the reason why that is because there's no win that is still going to keep him there. When you talk about Canelo, there's wins that are still going to keep him there. If you talk about Fury, there's at least wins overall that could potentially keep him within the top 5 or at least within the top 10. When you talk about Spence, there's probably at least a win or two that could potentially keep him there. But when it comes to Terence Crawford, I mean, there's the one win with Sean Porter, and then every other win, I'm not really sure if it's enough to still keep him in the top 5 if he were to lose his next fight.
The panel had already agreed Terence Crawford was number 1, the best fighter in the world. Mike Coppinger presented his personal pound-for-pound list to ESPN, and he had Canelo at number 1. Now, that was before Canelo lost to Bivol. Now, even today, after Canelo lost to Bivol, Mike Coppinger still does not have Crawford at number 1. Today he has Inoue or Usyk at...
Well, I really don't have a problem overall with Crawford being a number 1, but in my opinion, it's very debatable with Usyk and Fury and Spence. Those are the 4 fighters, in my opinion, to where you pretty much put their name in a hat, whichever one you draw out, number 1 and number 4. I really don't have a problem with it. Right now, in my opinion, there is not an undisputed best fighter on the planet ever since that Canelo Alvarez lost. And Canelo, in my opinion, even though I have a great amount of respect for Canelo, and I think that he's very clearly a great fighter, I can't really have him at the number 1 pound-for-pound spot because his last 50-50 fight against Dimitri Bivol really was abysmal. So it is what it is.
Number 1. And it's kind of...
And of course he lost.
Crazy because Crawford actually shows this man a lot of love. He talks to him on the phone personally, and still the love and respect is not being reciprocated. So let's go ahead and unpack all of this. Let's start with Derek Chisora. Once again, ESPN's Mike Coppinger. He puts these images together. This is supposed to be a celebration of Tyson Fury. The pictures of the opponents that Tyson Fury beats alone just shows you guys how low the bar is set for boxers that are not black, that actually beat black boxers.
And here we see overall DontesBoxingNation doing a regular fanboy tactic, which is what? Now overall that they surpass my expectations and they become greater overall, or they became greater than what I once originally thought they were going to be. Now I'm going to claim that their level of competition was very, very weak. And we see this with a lot of fanboyism. We see this with a lot of fanboys. I've seen this overall with the Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer fan base when Novak Djokovic was catching up in Grand Slams. What did they say? Oh, well, it doesn't really count because Novak Djokovic, he's facing in the weakest era when it comes down to, even though Roger Federer was beating a lot of guys that had never even won shit before either. But it is what it is. Same with Rafael Nadal in some of his finals, but that's a discussion for another time. Dante is doing overall his regular fanboy act, which is why I'm saying he is nothing more than just another boxing fanboy. He cannot be trusted as a commentator. All right, fanboys can never be trusted as logical and objective commentators. They never can be. They're too emotional. And now remember, this is the same guy that once again said that Deontay Wilder would beat Tyson Fury, that he would knock him out. And then this is also the same guy that said that Dillian Whyte is a much more complete fighter than Deontay Wilder, and I truly believe that Dillian Whyte will give him a much more tough fight. Tyson Fury dominated him, and he's still overall stating that Tyson Fury has not fought anybody. So Dante has truly shown you overall how objective he actually is.
Coppinger is saying with this picture is it does not matter how good the black boxer is. Just the fact that there is a white man that is beating black fighters, period. That alone is extremely impressive. So it's a backhand
Well, once again, Dante, I wouldn't have the biggest problem with what you're stating, but you're being a very, very, very big hypocrite, which you pretty much always have been. It just is what it is. And it's no offense, but he is. But fanboys in general are major hypocrites. Because whenever it comes to, threatening overall of certain fighters or certain overall athletes that they tend to like, all of a sudden they have to contradict themselves, to save overall their favorite athlete's legacy.
To black boxers. He's saying, man, do you know how good these black boxers are in the sport of boxing? And this white man is beating black boxers. That is truly...
Right, Dante. Well, it's understandable with Derek Chisora, but once again, you're the same person that claimed that you thought that Dillian Whyte was being avoided by Tyson Fury and that Dillian Whyte allegedly knocked him out in sparring and that Dillian Whyte apparently overall that he was going to give him a bigger challenge than even Deontay Wilder. So why all of a sudden is Dillian Whyte a shit fighter? So that's what I want to know. And then on top of that, Deontay Wilder, once upon a time, was in your top 5 pound for pound.
Amazing. Even if their opponents, like Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte, that had already previously gotten knocked out multiple times. And once again...
Well, you certainly were keeping that same energy overall. Once again, when you apparently said that Dillian Whyte was going to give more of a challenge than Deontay Wilder. So what's up with that? Why all of a sudden are you changing your energy? Once again, Dante is your regular fanboy.
Guys, that's how low the bar is set when you are someone on the hope list beating black boxers. Now, allow me to elaborate and really prove my case. Now, one of the first things, I mean, you notice many things when you look at this image, but one of the first things you notice is Mike Coppinger, he didn't put any pictures of any of the white boxers that Tyson Fury beat. That was
Well, once again, like I said, it could be argued that maybe overall it was just innocent and that maybe these were the last three opponents that Tyson Fury knocked out, because once again, I actually did not notice that until I really just recounted his last three fights. But overall, once again, do I think that there was a little bit of an undertone there? Yes, more than likely.
obviously done deliberately because this was supposed to show that Tyson is superior to black boxers in particular, despite the fact that fighters like Tom Schwartz actually has a much better record than Derek Chisora does. In fact, everyone has a better record than Derek Chisora. When Tyson Fury fought Derek Chisora this weekend, Derek was going into the ring with 12 losses and 4 knockout losses. And Tyson Fury had already beat Derek twice before the third fight, and decisively. I mean, that would be like Devin Haney deciding he's going to pull out of the Lomachenko fight and instead fight some guy that Devin Haney beat when he was 5-0, right? Completely dominated him. Now that same opponent has 12 losses on his record, and Devin decides he's going to fight him instead of fighting Lomachenko. The same people that are praising Tyson Fury right now were...
Well, what I'll say is this, and listen, don't get me wrong, some of the points that Dante is bringing up, I don't think that they're all invalid. If you're talking about ESPN, if this were a black fighter, would they be praising him the same way? No, probably not, because there would be a lot of people that would claim, of course, that this was a trash fight, and I get it. Now, once again, I don't really mind the fight that bad, because Fury has always shown me in the past that he's always going to go after the big fish anyway. You know, once again, a lot of people claim that he ducked the Wilder rematch. He took it. He won. A lot of people claim that he ducked White. He took it. He won. And a lot of people, of course, now are going to claim that he's ducking Usyk once again because they don't like Fury. So until proven otherwise, once again, I need to see it to believe it. But it is what it is. Same thing I've said about Canelo for a lot of years as well. But anyways, when it comes down to it, like I said, Fury very clearly is a great fighter when it comes down to it. But I don't mind the matchup that much because I think that it was pretty much just a tune-up for Fury. Apparently, he also needs surgery on his elbow. We'll see how that goes. And then on top of that, when it comes down to it, I do believe him and Derek Chisora, at least the interaction that I've seen, they do appear to be friends. You know, I'm not really sure how deep of friends they are. Maybe they're actually not friends. I don't know, but they appear to be friends. And maybe this may have been Tyson Fury's way to kind of give Derek Chisora a shot and maybe give him a good paycheck. I don't know.
Criticizing Devin Haney when he beat George Kambosos, who beat Teofimo Lopez, who beat Vasyl Lomachenko. Imagine what they would have said if Devin would have did exactly what Tyson Fury just did and decided...
Well, I would agree with you, Mr. Dante, but then it is up to you overall to keep on even keel standards. But you're not going to do that because really all you are is the pro-black version of ESPN.
To fight the Derek Chisora of his division. So guys, what type of reporter brags about Tyson Fury beating Derek Chisora or Dillian White? Coppinger is trying to make it look like Tyson Fury beat Sonny Liston, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, or even a Lennox Lewis. So let me give you guys just a little...
Well, I understand, Dante, and I think that that point is a little bit valid, but once again, we're talking about the same guy here, and I'm talking about Dante, who once again gives Gervonta Tank Davis and some of these other fighters like Wilder complete credit over pretty much fighting the bottom of the barrel opponents. Like when Wilder ended up beating Robert Elenius, and when Gervonta Tank Davis overall ended up beating Rolando Romero and Mario Barrios and Isaac Cruz. And none of those fighters, in my opinion, were necessarily horrible, but none of them were elite.
More contrast. Tyson Fury is in pretty much the same situation that Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford were in. Just like Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford, Tyson Fury, he has the option to fight Usyk for undisputed, right? Crawford had an opportunity to fight Errol Spence for undisputed and vice versa. Negotiations fell apart, and now Crawford is fighting against someone else, David Avanesian. Now, guys, pay attention to.
Yes, who was a fighter that does not stand any chance. Very similar overall to this Tyson Fury fight, which once again, I'm not going to criticize Terrence Bud Crawford too much because, in my opinion, there is room for tune-up fights. But if Terrence Bud Crawford, if I see this Errol Spence Jr. fight fall apart because allegedly he wants 50-50, it has to be blamed on Terrence Bud Crawford. Because I'm tired of hearing this bullshit about how apparently he wants 50-50 and he's worth this much more. And don't get me wrong, it's great to have a high worth value, when it comes down to it. But at the end of the day, no, sir, you don't deserve 50-50.
This video is not a debate on whose fault it was, the fallout between Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford.
Well, of course you won't debate that because more than likely it's Terrence Bud Crawford's. And you won't do that because that's going to look bad on your boy. And at the end of the day, if it looks bad on your boy, you can't claim him that he's the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. So, of course, you're not going to debate that. But anyway.
This is not about negotiations. I only want you guys to look at the contrast. Look at how Terrence Crawford was treated when he announced that he's going to fight David Avanesian next. And when Tyson Fury said that he's going to fight Derek Chisora. When it came to Terrence Crawford, Dan Rafael came out and he said there's no way this man should be considered pound for pound the best fighter in the world if he's fighting someone like David Avanesian. But when Tyson Fury announced that he was fighting Derek Chisora, there was no word from Dan Rafael or any of the other old media members. And as I showed you...
And I certainly do agree with you, Mr. Dante, but once again, and I keep on bringing this point repeatedly, and you can hear it basically with what he's stating. Dante keeps the same energy overall as what ESPN does. He just doesn't realize it. He basically overall, once again, he's not overall above them. He's not a logical and objective commentator. He's a person all in all that hates ESPN, and all in all, once again, he holds what they say with way too much value. And that's not me saying that you don't commentate on what they say. That's not me saying that sometimes you don't expose what they have to say. But when you go overall as far to basically kind of do the same shit that they do and do these bitch-ass things, your fanboyish things, and trying to degrade other fighters just because all in all you have a personal racial insecurity or racial issue, you're no better than them.
In his post, Mike Coppinger, he's actually congratulating and praising Tyson Fury, talking about how sharp he looked against Derek Chisora. When I say the bar is set so low for these fighters on the hope list, let's just compare Derek Chisora to David Avanesian as an opponent. David Avanesian, he has knocked out his last 6 opponents. Out of Derek Chisora's last 9 fights...
Right, but come on, Dante, let's not really try to argue that David Avanesian, overall, who I believe is a Romanian fighter, let's not say overall here that David Avanesian is that much better than Derek Chisora, because he's not. Yes, he's knocked out his last 6 opponents, but if we're talking about the chance overall that Derek Chisora has over Tyson Fury versus the chance that David Avanesian has over Terrence Bud Crawford, it pretty much would be very similar. So it is what it is. In fact, Derek Chisora overall, I mean, he at least got that one win over Carlos Takam, I believe, a few years ago, and has at least been in some decently competitive fights. David Avanesian, yes, he's knocked out some decent guys, but what top-ranked fighter has he really beaten? Let's just be real.
He lost 5 times. But even with David Avanesian being a much better opponent than Derek Chisora is...
Actually, he's not that much of a better opponent at all. Anyone who knows who David Avanesian is, David Avanesian has never really been that good of a fighter. He's been a gatekeeper for his whole entire career, who also, I believe, has possibly a stoppage loss. But anyway.
You think me or anyone else is going to post an image of Terrence Crawford's opponent, like guys that Terrence Crawford beat, with a crown on Terrence Crawford's head, bragging that he beat David Avanesian? Of course not. When Deontay Wilder was knocking everyone out left and right, including white...
Oh, please, Dante, when it comes down to it overall, basically what you do after each and every single one of the fighters that you like a Terrence Bud Crawford, when he knocked out Aegis Kavalaskas, you basically said, oh no, wow, this dude is a bad boy. You tried to act like it was that much bigger overall than what it was. Now, I'm not saying overall that you would post a picture like this, even though I'm not saying that that's completely out of your way, because I could see you doing something like that. But let's not overall, just cut the bullshit. Once again, every single time Gervonta Tank Davis or Terrence Crawford, Deontay Wilder, it doesn't matter whoever the hell these guys faces. It's always a big win when it's one of them. But when it comes to Canelo or Fury, apparently it isn't.
Boxers. You didn't see any members of the media putting up a picture of all of Deontay Wilder's victims. And one of the reasons you didn't see him do it is because we're all used to seeing black boxers knocking out fighters of every different race and nationality. Even when black boxers are knocking out undefeated champions. No one really celebrates for them like Mike Coppinger is doing for Tyson Fury beating Derek Chisora, because these are things that we're used to seeing all the time. When it
Well, I would somewhat certainly agree with that. And because Tyson Fury is a Caucasian fighter, is there going to be a little bit more of a celebration because of the rarity, at least compared to that of, elite black fighters? Yeah, you can certainly say that. But once again, Dante always tries to make people believe that Tyson Fury and Canelo Alvarez or some of these other fighters, that they're complete charlatans. And no, they're not complete charlatans. Once again, even if a fighter, all in all, very clearly may be a little bit overhyped, or even if they are somewhat of a great big white hope, you have to realize overall, and you have to have the intelligence and the logic and objectivity to realize, okay, you know what? Yeah, sure. There might be a little bit of extra spice with the way that they're covered in the media, but is there actual substance to this athlete? Like I said, Patrick Mahomes, do you think all in all that his complete appeal overall is just that he's a great talented quarterback? No, of course not. He's also one of the greatest overall dominant black quarterbacks, and probably the greatest black quarterback that I've personally ever seen in NFL history, at least when it comes down to the combined package. So, of course, that's a part of his appeal. Do you think that Tiger Woods' appeal was just that he was a great golfer? Of course not. It just is what it is. All right, that's a part of it. But for those of us that are logical and objective, we have to realize, is there substance to this athlete? Is he still a great athlete? And Tyson Fury is a great athlete. He's a great boxer.
comes to black boxers. I mean, it's kind of like racing somebody on a bike, and the guy you're racing actually has training wheels on the bike. And people are actually giving the guy who had training wheels on his bike more credit than everyone that was riding the bikes without training wheels. This is what we see by old media.
And now you're going on some bullshit about Tyson Fury because once again, Tyson Fury has actually beat legitimate A grade fighters. Fighters that at one point in time you had on your top 5 pound for pound list. So let's cut the bullshit.
Every day in the sport of boxing. Tyson Fury beats Dillian White, Derek Chisora, and Deontay Wilder, and ESPN's Mike Coppinger is putting up images like this. When it comes to Inoue, you couldn't name me 3 fighters that Inoue has beaten without looking it up on the internet.
Well, actually, I possibly could, but I understand your point. And I've been saying this for a while, and I had certain people disagree with me, but it just is what it is. This is the way that I look at it. Inoue and Jamel Charlo, in my opinion, they've been the two most overrated fighters on the top 10 pound for pound list for a little bit. It just is what it is. Inoue, in my opinion, very talented fighter. And not saying that all the fights that didn't happen in his career are 100% his fault, but I cannot have someone on the top 10 pound, or excuse me, in my top 5 when I don't think that any of the fighters that they beat were ever 100% A grade. Not me saying that maybe there's not some that could have been debated as A minus, but I just don't know if he has the resume, in my opinion, to be a top 5 pound for pound fighter.
Only fighter we all know that he beat was a 40-year-old Nonito Donaire. And yet old media.
Well, Naoya Inoue has beaten a couple of fighters that I remember. Of course, Nonito Donaire was one of them. I also remember when he beat Jamie McDonnell, and I believe he also beat Rodriguez, or overall one of those fighters, I believe, at the lower weight classes that was very decent. But I just don't know if that's enough to put him in my top 5. Very dominant fighter and very talented, but I just don't know if he has the resume to be top 5 in my view. But anyway.
Yeah, they had
Now, if he were to become top 5, or at least very debatably, the one win he would have to get is over Steve Von Fulton.
him on the pound for pound list. Some even had him
And
at
I don't have Steve Von Fulton in my top 10 pound for pound either.
number 1, while not even having Devin Haney on the pound for pound list, while he's the youngest undisputed champion in boxing today. When it comes to Inoue, not only should he not be in the top 3 when it comes to the pound for pound list, he shouldn't be on the list at all. Javante Tank.
Well, I'm not going to necessarily 100% say that he shouldn't be on the list at all, but I do agree on the note that he shouldn't be within the top 3. I think that's a bit ridiculous. He just doesn't have the resume to prove that, in my opinion. is just not proven. And some people, once again, they can get mad at that, but it is what it is. I do not count any of the fighters that he's beaten as 100% A grade. It just is what it is, or at least is A plus.
Davis has faced way better competition than I know he has, and knocked out way better competition.
Well, he's beaten overall a fighter in what the hell is his name, Leo Santa Cruz, to where I would argue that Leo Santa Cruz is probably better or at least greater than any of the opponents in Inoue's career, at least at the point that he fought them. But yeah, I mean, the rest of his opponents are pretty much just meh. I mean, let's not sit here and act like Devonta Tank Davis that he's just been knocking out killers, because it hasn't been happening. It just Dante will try to tell you that, but Rolly Romero, Mario Barrios, and Isaac Pitbull Cruz, these are not A-grade fighters.
Than I know he has. If old media is going to praise Tyson Fury for knocking out Derek Chisora, imagine what they are really saying about how impressed they are with Gervonta Tank Davis under their breath. We know for a fact, Gervonta, Devin, Shakur, Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence.
Well, a lot of those people I do believe are impressed with Gervonta Tank Davis. And a lot of people that tend to badmouth certain fighters the most or certain athletes the most, they actually tend to be the most impressed with them. The reason overall why they tear them down so much, once again, is because they see them as a viable threat to their favorite athlete. And that's why DontesBoxingNation also tears down Canelo and Fury and Usyk so much, because he sees them as viable threats. But anyway.
The Charlo brothers, they would never fight a Derek Chisora.
Because if you always notice in sports, whenever it comes to, let's say, a Lionel Messi or overall what the hell is his name, Cristiano Ronaldo conversation, it's always those two fan bases that go at it the most. You know why that is? Because a lot of fans already know that they're somewhat on a very similar level. Whenever it comes to tennis, it's the Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal fans that always go at each other's throats. But the reason why that is because they all know that they're somewhat viable overall to be a threat against each other. If you're talking about basketball, it's going to be LeBron James and Stephen Curry, or Kevin Durant, possibly Kawhi Leonard. If you're talking about football, I mean, there's really no argument with Tom Brady, but maybe about other arguments, maybe Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and Patrick Mahomes, a Drew Brees, But anyway.
We know this for a fact. Now let's talk about Deontay Wilder. It's so ironic because when Deontay Wilder was undefeated, old media, they talked about Deontay Wilder as if he was the worst heavyweight champion of all time. You heard Teddy Atlas constantly blasting him, talking about how he has no skill. Matter of fact, Teddy Atlas, he said that Deontay Wilder was one of the worst heavyweights of all time, if not the worst heavyweight champion. You guys all seen the comments?
Well, once again, what I'm going to say is this. It's very clear that Deontay Wilder, that he never had an A-grade skill set. Never did. But at the end of the day, he was skilled enough, and combined with the power, he always was going to be a viable threat to anyone in the heavyweight division. And he even gave Tyson Fury a run for his money in a couple of the fights. So, once again, Wilder does need to be given credit. And I understand where Dante is coming from. But really the point that he's trying to make right now was that Deontay Wilder, that he's really not that good, overall, because, you guys said that he was trash. Well, Dante, here's my question to you. You once upon a time had Deontay Wilder up in your top 5 pound for pound. So are you really claiming that Deontay Wilder now is trash because you truly believe that he's trash, or are you just pissed off because of the circumstances that actually ended up happening? And I think we all know the answer.
He was Windmill Wilder. He was so horrible. But now all of a sudden, once Tyson Fury beats him, now they're comparing Tyson Fury to Muhammad Ali.
And that shows you all in all, once again, that what they say cannot be trusted. And that all in all, that, they overall are not to be relied upon. But Dante does a lot of the same shit.
Guys can't have it both ways. And this is what they do.
I agree with you. And Dante, you can't have it both ways. You can't 1 year overall have Deontay Wilder in your top 5 pound for pound, and then the next year claim that he's trash now that he ended up losing to a fighter that you don't want to promote higher.
All the time. As long as Wilder is winning, he's garbage. As soon as...
That's how every big fanboy is. Skip Bayless most recently overall when he was talking about Stephen Curry, because he hates Stephen Curry overall with the burning passion, ever since he lost to LeBron James in the 2016 finals and fucked up that series. Skip Bayless was claiming that if Steph Curry was going to be a top 10 player, he would need to be very great against the Boston Celtics. Well, Steph Curry proved that against the Boston Celtics. And what does Skip Bayless say now? He basically says, "Oh, well, the Boston Celtics were a fake team." That's what a fanboy does. They contradict themselves. They're hypocrites. They completely change the standards. It's never enough for them. And that's how you know someone is not a logical and objective commentator. They never keep the same standards.
Tyson Fury beats Wilder. Now, oh man, but Tyson Fury beat Wilder. Man, he deserves a statue for that. He beat Wilder. You have to keep the same energy, which they
I agree with you, Dante, and so do you.
did not do, obviously. So Deontay Wilder is the best name, the best and the biggest name on Tyson Fury's resume. And according to old media,
Well, no, actually, the biggest and the best name on Tyson Fury's resume to this day still remains Vladimir Klitschko. I mean, if you want to claim the biggest star, at least during the time when Fury fought them, was Deontay Wilder, you can go ahead and claim that. But the most skilled and the best opponent that he ever fought and the most accomplished was still Vladimir Klitschko. I don't think that there's really a debate that Wilder would ever be above Klitschko. Now, one could debate that maybe had they fought, that maybe Wilder could have beat him. Who knows? I probably still would have bet on Vladimir just because I think that, he probably would have been a little bit too experienced and a little bit too good overall for Wilder. But you never know. You never know when it comes down to it. Vladimir was not usually used to fighting, very tall and lengthy opponents. That's why he had such a big problem against Tyson Fury. But no, Vladimir Klitschko is still the best and the greatest and the most accomplished fighter that Fury has ever fought.
that man was garbage before Tyson Fury beat him. Do you guys recall anyone saying that Sonny Liston was garbage before Ali beat him? Joe Frazier, George Foreman, hell, when Lennox Lewis beat Vitaly Klitschko, who was the best out of the Klitschko brothers.
No. Right, but Dante, basically all you're doing is that you're using this now overall to basically discredit Tyson Fury. Once upon a time, Deontay Wilder once again graced your top 5 pound for pound list, but now that Deontay Wilder really doesn't have much use to you anymore, when it comes down to it, you're basically just going to disregard him, basically overall, like, the next day's trash. It just is what it is.
Nobody was calling Vitaly garbage. Nobody was saying anything bad about Vitaly. I'm sure you guys have heard the saying before, when you black, you gotta work 10 times harder. Some would say just to get the credit you deserve, or some would say just to get half the credit you deserve. And I truly believe this is what makes black American boxers so dominant, because they have always had to work 10 times harder. At the end of the day, Tyson Fury, he's definitely a good heavyweight, but if the best opponent...
He's not even just a good heavyweight, Dante, and that really is a backhanded compliment. Tyson Fury is a great heavyweight, and he's a great heavyweight, but it is what it is. You can't claim that, because you know that if Tyson Fury ends up undefeated in his career, you're going to be hearing these guys overall claim that Fury is the greatest heavyweight of all time, and you don't want to hear that. But once again, if Fury, I've already stated this, if he beats Usyk and becomes completely undisputed, and then beats Joe Joyce and Joshua, and that's pretty much about it. He won't really need to prove anything else than that. He will have a debate as the greatest heavyweight of all time. People can like it, they can not like it, but it is what it is. You cannot be completely undisputed, have the skill set that he has when it comes down to be undefeated debatably in your career. Let's just say that happens speculatively, and not be debatably the greatest heavyweight of all time.
That he's beaten is only Deontay Wilder, then he has a whole lot of catching up to do compared to all the...
No, the best names all in all that Fury has beaten in his career has been Deontay Wilder, Vladimir Klitschko, and Dillian Whyte. All three of those guys are A-grade fighters. Now, the rest of them I wouldn't say are A-grade fighters, but those three guys clearly were A-grade fighters. And if he beats Joe Joyce, Alexander Usyk, and Anthony Joshua, then overall he's going to be on his way.
Other heavyweight champions. I have so much to say when it comes to this topic, but I got to wrap this one up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out, guys.
But anyways, that's really about it for today. I just thought that I would talk about that because I found that video very particularly interesting. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.